The pick is in.
The Cincinnati Bengals have made a selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. Alongside Locked On College Football host Spencer McLaughlin, I am Tanisha Batiste, and we are joined by Jake Lisco of Locked On Bengals to break down the Bengals selecting Kris Jenkins with the 49th pick. So, Jake, what do you like about this pick to add to the Bengals defensive front?
The Bengals desperately needed improvement in run defense, and losing DJ Reader really accentuated and underlined that need. It was in bold, it was capitalized in terms of looking at the Bengals' needs this offseason. And Kris Jenkins will immediately slot in as a rotational player for this team. He doesn't need to start right away. The Bengals have starters in BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins, who they signed from the Texans, 198 to replace another 98, and DJ Reader, who they lost after having him as a free agent from the Texans for a few years. But Jenkins immediately improves their DT3 spot, should improve their run defense immediately. And one of the biggest needs for this team entering the draft was DT3. When one of those guys had to go to the sideline for a rest and they had to bring their first defensive tackle onto the field, it was a noticeable and massive downgrade. And it was clearly and frequently targeted by opposing offenses.
Now, of course, like you mentioned, he won't necessarily have to start or take a majority of the reps for the Bengals. So what are some of those areas that maybe they can work on as they get Kris up to speed?
There's a little bit of work to do for him in the pass rush part of his game. I think he's not necessarily a refined or technically diverse pass rusher. The arsenal for pass rush moves could stand to see some additions, and so they can bring him along in that part of his game. But maybe it was just that he wasn't asked to do that at Michigan either. He was also asked to two-gap, I think, a fair amount at Michigan. And for Cincinnati, I think, given the size of the players they're going to be running out on the interior defensive line at this point with BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins, none of those guys are true nose tackle bodies, and Kris Jenkins is no exception to that rule. You're going to see more one-gapping from this defensive line, and so there will be a little bit of a transition there for him, but I don't think that they're going to have to ask him to do anything crazy. They're not going to ask him to go in there and play nose and take on double teams all the time. And he'll have time to develop and come along as a rotational player like he was in Michigan, and has probably a year or two before he'll be asked to play a monstrous amount of snaps in that defense.
For more on the Bengals, subscribe to Locked On Bengals on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Spencer, what is it that you like about the D tackle out of Michigan?
Yeah, I think it's his run stuffing ability, just his ability to be a presence and, be able to hold his own and make a little bit of an impact, but really does not do that in the passing game. This is not someone who the Bengals should be relying on to provide interior pressure. Now, he could play, a little inside, a little outside. They might be figuring out, as they work him into the rotation where he lines up best. And maybe that's what they like about him is, hey, we could see him doing this. We could see him doing that. You just can't expect him, at least not right away, to be able to pressure the quarterback from up the middle. But when the Bengals' biggest need, as you heard just a moment ago, is in the run defense department, that's where this pick makes a lot of sense.
For continuing coverage of the 2024 NFL Draft, subscribe to Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.